Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and the co-host of the podcast Fear and Greed Business News. As always, I am with Canna Campbell, financial planner, founder of Sugar Mama TV, the financial literacy platform covering YouTube and podcasts, books, Instagram, Threads, TikTok and more. Hello, Canna.
Good morning.
You weren't even looking at me. You were just busy you were looking for a savings tip, weren't you?
I was just referring to my DM on Instagram from the lovely person that has sent through today's saving hack. This is really good, and I'm going to have a lot of pleasure reading this message out to you at the end of this episode.
We do that at the end of the show. We always have a good savings hack or a savings tip to finish on. But today, this episode is for anyone struggling with debt. It might be a credit card. It could be a couple of credit cards that you just can't pay off. Maybe it's a car loan, a personal loan, the home loan just getting you down. It could be buy now, pay later debt that just keeps piling up. I want to look today at debt strategies, kind of how to get it under control, because there are a bunch of different debt plans that you hear about online. Things like the debt avalanche and the debt snowball and a few others. And
My hit list.
What?
I have a hit list.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm assuming we're going to be talking about that, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I just love the names, though. Debt avalanche, debt snowball, kind of debt snowman. I don't know. Like it all feels like it's got kind of like a wintry kind of...
Snowflary.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. But we're going to go through them. We are going to see if we can find one that works better than the others. Before we do that, though, just know that as you're listening, everything that we talk about is always general in nature. It is never personal, investment, strategic, or product advice. It is purely for financial education purposes only. Speaking of financial education, Canna, the difference between toxic debt, semi-toxic, and non-toxic debt. What's the difference?
All right. Toxic debt is a classic example credit card. So you have borrowed money to buy something that just completely evaporates in value, such as clothes or stuff, gadgets and gizmos, and then there is interest incurred on that is not tax deductible, and it is debt that actually impacts your financial well-being. And so there's no capital growth, there's no tax deduction, and there's definitely no source of, passive income coming from what you've purchased.
Okay.
So buy now, pay later, credit cards, personal loans,
right,
and car loans, assuming that they're not used for work purposes.
That's toxic.
Very toxic.
So non-toxic, though, is the opposite end, I'm assuming. Debt that has a value?
Yes. So, for example, not advice, but for example, when you borrow to buy an investment property or you borrow to buy some shares, because the idea or the hope is that will increase in value, capital growth, it will provide you a passive income such as dividends or rent, and it is tax deductible. That is, the interest is tax deductible along the way. That is the type of debt you want to maximize. Toxic debt is what you want to minimize or just have none of.
Is there something in between semi-toxic, or did I make that up?
No, you're quite right. And this one is some people will disagree with me, but an example is your home.
Because it's got a value to you, but it is not tax deductible.
And you're not receiving any income from it because you're living in it.
This is quite profound.
I know. And the reason why people might go, well, that's not true. My property's gone up in value. Yes, but so has your next door neighbours as well. Everyone. That's why it's called semi-toxic debt. And that's why I call it a lifestyle asset rather than a financial asset, that, a principal place of residence.
Okay. All right. So that's the debt. That's kind of that's the landscape that we're dealing with here. What on earth is the debt avalanche?
So the debt avalanche is a debt-free strategy that people use where you focus on paying off the debts with the highest interest rate first.
Okay.
So say, for example, I have 5 credit cards and, the interest rate being charged on one of them is 22%, the other one is 13%, the other one is, say, 7%, and the other, say, 5% each. You would focus on paying off as a number one priority the debt with the 22% interest rate. Obviously, you'd have minimum payments for the other ones in the meantime, but any surplus cash flow that you can create or go through from doing your budget, you would direct towards paying off the highest interest rate first.
So it's very targeted, and it's really kind of like a mindset thing that you go, okay, if I can wipe out the biggest debt, the most expensive debt,
yeah.
the most expensive debt, then I can then, as soon as that's done, move on to the next one, and it avalanches down.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Do you like that strategy?
I do. I think any debt strategy is a great strategy.
Yeah.
But I come from a different point of view where I think about the psychology of money. You see, when someone has debts and, for example, multiple debts, it's very overwhelming because each debt to me symbolizes a ball that you're trying to juggle in the air. And to be able to juggle efficiently, you need to try and reduce the amount of balls in the air. So my personal preference is what I call my hit list strategy, which is also very similar to the debt snowball strategy.
Well, is now a good time to discuss the debt snowball strategy?
Yes, I think that's a perfect opportunity.
What a wonderful segue. What is the debt snowball strategy?
So the debt snowball and the hit list strategy is where you focus on the smallest debt first.
Ah.
Yes, so each debt represents a ball in the air. So the way that it makes it easier to juggle balls is to have the least amount of balls in the air. So,
so you're taking one out.
So you're almost thinking about crossing off, like hitting or punching off your list, the number of debtors. And obviously it's going to be fast to reduce those balls in the air by focusing on the smallest ones first. But what I like about this the most is the psychology of it, because you can actually get a greater sense of progress and momentum, and you feel more empowered and inspired to keep going because you can feel and see a bigger shift going, okay, well, I don't have 5 credit card debts to pay off. I've now got 3 credit cards or 4 credit cards. It feels mentally like you're actually making an impact. You're having a bit of a shift and a breakthrough, which then empowers you to keep going with the process until you're completely debt-free. However...
Oh, okay, go on.
Obviously, if you're, the smallest debt may have the smallest interest cost or expense to attach to it. So you may end up spending more money in interest in doing this. However, I have coached so many people out of huge amounts of debt, and I find that this one actually works the best and really taps into people's psychology of money in a healthier, more efficient way. And I see them actually go all the way through. Rather than with the avalanche, you can kind of feel like, oh my gosh, it just feels like forever these debts are here. I've still got the same 5 people or 5 institutions that I owe money to. It doesn't tap into that dopamine, I guess, that you get from going, wow, all right, I can cross that one off my list, one done, next 4 to go. And
it is a very satisfying thing to actually achieve something.
And who doesn't love, crossing things off your list?
Yeah. Okay, so that's the debt snowball, also known as the hit
Sugar
list.
Mama's hit list.
Sugar Mama's hit list. I'm a very slow writer. Here I'm just taking notes. Okay. Debt snowball, Sugar Mama's hit list. We have a few other ones that I want to talk to you about. We'll take a very quick break, and on the other side of the break, we'll get into those. Kana, we are talking today about debt, but in particular, we are talking about how to deal with debt repayment strategies. We talked before about the debt avalanche and the debt snowball, which is also known as Sugar Mama's hit list, which does feel like you have rebranded something and tweaked it and made it your own.
No, you know what? People may think that, but I've been talking about the hit list strategy for, I think, maybe ever since I was a financial planner, which is 18 years. So
Are you saying the snowball stole it from you?
Quite possibly.
Scandal.
To me, it's common sense. So
it actually does feel like
it's
that.
quite a generic strategy, and it's not rocket science here. So
yeah, no, it's and the fact is that, as you say, it's more about the psychology behind it. It is about the mentality of actually the satisfaction of crossing something off your list rather than just kind of necessarily the smartest financial move.
Exactly.
Okay. Consolidating debts. Where do you stand on that? Because I've never seen that face before. That was a new face for the studio. You look perplexed. Because consolidating debt, would you do that if you had multiple debts? Say you got debts all over the place. Would you combine them all into one, potentially one loan, maybe with a lower interest rate, potentially? I'm not convinced, and that face is just like...
I'm feeling all these ugly faces.
No, it's
how I feel about it.
Okay, so you're not a fan.
Okay, mathematically and financially, on paper, it works. You're going to consolidate it, It's simple. Hopefully you access a lower interest rate. The problem is, and I'm saying this from a professional point of view of what I've seen and what I've worked with people, it ends up quite often backfiring because it doesn't fix the underlying problem. So this is what tends to happen 9 times out of 10. Someone will get into credit card debt, and say $10,000. And they get to this period and they go, oh my gosh, $10,000 of credit card debt. What am I going to do? They panic. And they see advertised on the back of a bus, you can consolidate your credit card debt and you get 12 months interest free. You can transfer your balance across. You think, great, I'm going to buy myself 12 months to pay off this $10,000 worth of credit card debt. And the relief. Now, what happens in the meantime is your habit system doesn't change. You don't get any better at doing your budget. You don't be responsible and set up a strict debt repayment plan of say $1,000 a month for 10 months to pay off that card. You continue on as what you were doing previously, which is what actually got you into debt in the first place. And what tends to happen is 12 months later, you're now in $20,000 worth of debt because even though you had the best intentions of paying off that original $10,000 worth of debt, it hasn't actually happened.
Yeah, and it might last for a week.
And in the meantime, you've used this new credit card, which you consolidated. Now you're in another $10,000 worth of debt. I have seen this so many times. And the problem I have with it is it just kind of pushes the problem into the future. It doesn't empower you to be responsible. And I feel like there's a lot of this out there because a lot of this product and service being offered because the institutions know that you're not going to stop spending. You're going to keep going. You're going to keep living a life in debt. And they know that you're going to get deeper and deeper into that debt.
Can I ask you then, is that the same problem for balance transfers for credit cards?
Yes.
Because this was something else that I've seen put out there as a debt management kind of strategy where you can transfer your balance from a higher interest rate to a lower or a zero interest rate card. But I suppose if you still have access to these other higher rates, then if you still have that kind of need, that desire to spend, and you haven't changed those habits, you're going to keep doing that.
Exactly.
And if you have a 0% interest rate on a credit card, that doesn't last forever.
Well, this is my next point. That honeymoon period is over and now you've got 2 credit cards that you owe a lot of money on and they're interest rate is now kicked in and you're paying, sometimes up to 22% on a credit card.
Yeah, and that's a nasty jump, isn't it? From 0% for 3 months and then all of a sudden up to 22%, and it's just that hurts.
The only time I've ever seen someone do this correctly is they've gone and set up a repayment plan and they've basically put and restricted all use of credit cards full stop.
Okay.
And they've put up a debt repayment plan into their budget. And they've paid it off just in time before that new interest rate kicked in.
Is there such a thing as a debt management plan?
Yes, there is. And there are various forms of it. But the most popular one is called a Part 9 debt agreement. And this is one option before bankruptcy. And it is where you agree to pay a certain percentage of your debts. And you have to get a middle party involved to help negotiate all the terms and conditions. And generally speaking, the goal is to try and pay it off within 3 years.
That is serious stuff then.
It is. And there are lots of levels of fees involved. So it's not ideal, but for some people, they have to, this is their only option before going down that bankruptcy path.
What do you mean by external parties and third parties? Is it like a business that kind of manages these things?
Yes.
So they would be making money out of this kind of process. It's not a government kind of
No,
thing.
it's a business and they're called a debt administrator. And that's why you need to really check the fine print and understand the cost of this because there are multiple fees, layers of fees involved, but they're essentially the go-between of who you owe money to and sort of on your behalf and seeing what they can do to help, reduce the overall amount of debt and get a sort of, I guess, some sort of realistic debt repayment plan in place for you.
It feels like the nuclear option. Like that feels like when all else fails, kind of that's what you would do. But you would get some advice before you do that, wouldn't you? Can you, like a debt kind of counsellor?
Of course. So you'd speak to a financial counsellor or another great resource is the National Debt Helpline, which is free. And it's a 1-800 number that everyone can access and get some advice. But I know this is going to sound a little bit cringeworthy, but I really believe in the gestation period. Yes, get help. Yes, get counseling. Have a look at what the habit system that's going on. Learn how to do a budget. Learn how to manage your cash flow. Yes, you may have to have a second job or even a third job, but when and I'm saying this from professional experience and working with so many people, when I see people go through the gestation period and do the hard work, understand the sacrifice, the level of commitment, the level of determination, how hard it is to actually get out of debt. When they've done all the work themselves, they are less likely to go back and repeat history again because they've learnt their lesson.
Yeah.
And they do not want to ever have to go through that ever again. So sometimes I feel like you're not going to learn your lesson necessarily by, going down these options of a debt agreement. Have a go at trying to fix this yourself, obviously with professional help and using all these free resources around you.
Yeah, and I'll just mention the National Debt Helpline. The website is ndh.org.au, and you can talk on the phone, you can chat online as well, and just get some advice and just get some help, because it can be a pretty kind of daunting place to be, can't it? Just feeling like you are being overwhelmed by your debt.
But you also need to understand what the consequences of going down a Part 9 agreement, and then things, obviously it's potentially on a public register, and that may impact your credit score, which we've spoken about the impact of that. And obviously there are certain requirements as well about your income and how much debt you have to pay back.
But there's also consequences for not getting the debt under control. There aren't there, and the consequences can actually be quite similar in a way, in terms of the impact on your credit report, the ability to get loans in the future, to get a credit card, car loan, home loan, all those kinds of things, and the potential to have people chasing you for money.
Oh, there's a very the negative stigma that comes from these as well. It's in an already very stressful, overwhelming world. You don't want to necessarily add that to your plate if you can avoid it.
Okay, so really we can say, look, consolidating debts into one loan with a lower interest rate is an option, not the best, because you don't necessarily change the habits that got you there. The mentality, the mindset doesn't change. Their debt management plan, Part 9 debt agreement is an option, but it is very much a last resort, and there are a lot of consequences, and you should do it knowing what you're getting yourself into. Check the fine print and get some advice. Balance transfers for credit cards are very similar to consolidating your debt into one loan, because if you don't change the underlying behavior, you will end up in the same position. And the debt avalanche, paying off debts with the highest interest rate first, that is a strategy, not a bad strategy, because at least you are tackling that debt and you would be able to watch it going down. And hey, there might be a bit of sense to kind of tackling that debt that's a 22% kind of premium credit card. But the one that you like most is the debt snowball, or the hit list, which is really targeting the smallest debt first, because you get that satisfaction, you get that reward of actually crossing a debt off your list. You
can see the sense of progress, the light at the end of the tunnel, which will then inspire you to keep going and do the work.
Now, and I like what you said, the fact that you are just taking one of those balls out of the air, and it makes it a whole lot easier to juggle.
And I think there's a lot you can learn about going through this, is that, all those skills that you're learning to get yourself out of debt, you can then apply to then building up emergency savings, and then to start maybe saving up for something, an exciting financial goal like your first home, or paying off your home, or maybe even start investing. There is a blessing in disguise, I believe, for, going through this work and doing the work, the physical work, but also the internal work as well.
Okay. Well, just quickly, Canna, before we leave all of this, and I probably should have actually kind of squeezed this into the middle, because I feel like I've just wrapped everything up very, very neatly here. And we're finishing on the positive, going back to something that's not so positive, bankruptcy.
Oh, this is the last resort. And there is this misconception that if you go down the path of bankruptcy, that, all of your debts will be wiped clean. And that's not necessarily the case. And we talked about that negative stigma that comes with, a Part 9 debt agreement, but this is even harder with going bankruptcy. And there are long-term repercussions from doing this. So, not only is your credit rating just pretty much destroyed, so your ability to get finance further down the track, and there are fees involved. And you may end up having, if you ever do qualify for finance, you may have to pay a much higher interest rate because you're what's considered high risk. But it's also quite humiliating because your name goes on a register, the National Personal Insolvency Index, and it stays there for 3 years and 1 day. And the other thing a lot of people don't know is if you have had to go down that bankruptcy path, you may actually have your travel restricted. And you may have problems taking out insurance, such as public liability insurance. And you may not be able to be a director of a company as well. So
wow,
these are serious long-term repercussions from using this. So this is not a quick fix at all. It's something that you need to get a lot of advice, and it is like the last and final option.
The absolute last resort.
And your assets, what assets that you may actually still have could be still taken away from you and sold to help pay those debts off.
Okay. All right. Can you finish on something positive? Can you finally you can get to the savings tip, the savings hack that you were kind of gloating about at the beginning of the show?
Well, my friend, I'm going to just use her initials here because I'm not sure if she would like me to share who she is. So I'm going to call her KP. Hi, Canna. I have a savings tip that may not have been given before, but I wanted to give it to you over Michael because he's competitive and I think this could irk him in a good way. Ha, 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 ha.
Okay, your friend's a savage. This is unkind, KP. Sorry, go on.
So if you don't have a car or have lots of room, you can rent out your car park. I'm making over $180 per month.
That's actually good advice. Mm-hmm. It didn't need to be so nasty though, KP.
So I went back to KP and I was like, give me more. How are you doing this? So she did this through Parkhound, which is kind of like Gumtree, Airbnb, but for parking.
Car parks. Okay.
Yeah, car parks, parking spots. But over time, she found out a way of actually, I guess, bypassing and is actually able to rent this out for cash.
Oh, because I suppose if she's had someone doing it long term through the platform, maybe she just does it on the side then with them. But who knows? That's a good idea.
It gets better. KP is
okay.
very clever. Please don't tell my council, but I actually rent out my parking permits. I get one for free and I buy another one for $100 per year. I make $180 twice a month for the two. $4,320 a year minus the $100 I use to pay for the permit.
I have so much respect for authority that I just don't know whether I can endorse this from KP. This feels highly rule breakery.
She actually goes on to say, can you please let me know when you mention this to Michael and I'll make sure I listen in. I'd love him to know I did this to irk him, laughing out loud. I do like the guy a lot. He's funny, just like the banter with the two of you on the show.
Well, she's succeeded. She has irked me. And if I knew who she was, I would report her to her local council for the abuse of her parking permits. I do not know who she is, so I'm just going to have to report the anonymous KP to every council in Australia.
KP, you are safe with me, I promise.
How do we find you if anyone wants to get in touch?
Maybe any local councils. The best place to get in contact with me is on Instagram at SugarMamaTV, which is exactly where KP said this very juicy $4,320 side hustle hack, really.
Yeah, that's a good one. That is quite a chunky side hustle. And you can obviously send your side hustles, your hacks, your savings tips to me instead, Michael Thompson, author, and help me get one back over Canna, because this is outrageous. And you can also hear me every day with Sean Aylmer on Fear and Greed, Australia's best business podcast. Thank you for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and the best thing you can do is tell somebody else or send them this episode. Just send it on to them. Spread the word about How Do They Afford That? Thank you for your company. Join us again next week.